Hey YouTube, what's going on? I'm Danny with Danny's Tech Channel. Last week I put out a post asking you, the viewers, about what kind of videos you want to be able to see. And I actually only got one response, which is fine. But you know what? I decided to do a video on it, and here it is. It's all about power supplies. Yep, you heard me right. Power supplies. Your power supply is probably one of the most important parts of your system, yet it is most often overlooked. So today, I want to talk about everything I know about power supplies and try to sum it all up in a few little key points. And when you're shopping for a power supply, maybe I'll answer some questions you have or tell you some things that you need to know before buying. For the sizes, there's really only two major sizes that you're going to need to worry about, unless you're dealing with like OEM systems, which do some weird proprietary power supplies. If you're building your own, these are the two. You've got SFX, which is micro-sized. I mean, you can see it fits in the palm of my hand, but that's gonna be for your small form factor builds, and they're very specific to the case. So make sure your case can fit your power supply before purchasing. The second kind is an ATX power supply. Now, these come in different lengths, but they're all the same squared dimensions because they will bolt to the back of your case and then sit in the bottom or at the top. You can see that one just overlaps a little bit, so just make sure you have the clearance in your case before buying. But ATX is gonna be your major style of power supply that you're going to need for a custom build. Along with the sizing part of it, there's the modularity part, and this is where most people just buy whatever's the cheapest. The first is going to be the one I have right in front of me here, which is fully modular. This means that the power supply comes in just its own little brick and all the cables are detachable. You can unplug and plug in whatever ones you need to fit your build, because you may not need all the cables that the power supply comes with in the box. The second kind, which I've actually started liking the most, is a semi-modular power supply. This one comes with the power for the motherboard and the EPS cables already attached. And then it's got semi-modularity for your PCI and SATA and stuff like that. Now, the reason I like these the best is everybody needs these cables. In order to make any computer work, no matter what, you have to have these two cables. So you will always plug these in. And finally, the last type of modularity power supply is non-modular. These ones I don't recommend because they look like this. Look at this nest of cables. These things, you can't unplug anything. They just give you whatever they give you, and you've just gotta make it work and tuck it and hide it wherever you can find space. Let's move on and talk about the efficiency rating of power supplies. I don't claim to know everything about efficiency ratings. In fact, I had to do my research before making this video just to be able to tell you the basic information that I already have. If your power supply doesn't have this little sticker at the bottom that says 80 plus and then bronze, silver, gold, so on and so forth, don't buy it. You definitely can get a power supply that has some kind of an 80 plus efficiency rating. They really all have it now, and if you're shopping for one that doesn't, I recommend to stay away from it. Honestly, what you really need to know is bronze and gold is most commonly the standards that people are shopping for when they're buying power supplies. You'd be fine with either one, honestly. A rule of thumb that I'll give you is if you're willing to spend over $1,000 on a computer, you should probably go with a gold rated power supply just to be safe. And I mean, you're already spending that kind of money. I've seen gold rated power supplies. I got this 850X, which is gold rated, for $135. Either one would be fine. The ratings really are close in range to each other. At 100% load, the 80 plus bronze is required to hit 82% efficiency. Well, at 100% load for an 80 plus gold, it's required to hit 87% efficiency. So it's really not far of a jump between bronze, silver, gold, titanium, platinum, titanium. But like I said, you'd be fine with either a bronze or a gold. Take your pick, it really doesn't matter. Now, something that does matter is wattage. How many watts does your system need? Well, that really depends on your components that you put in it. And honestly, the CPU and the GPU are the two major components that are gonna determine how much wattage you need for your power supply. The CPU draws anywhere between 65 and 105 to 125 watts depending on if you overclock or if you have a high-end or a low-end CPU. Now, your graphics card is ultimately what determines how high of a power supply you need. Graphics cards can draw anywhere from 75 all the way up to 375 watts now. I think some of them can do 400 watts with those 3090 OC editions and stuff. So you really just need to figure out what components you want, and then you can determine how high of a wattage power supply you'll need. One thing I always do when picking out PC components is I like to go to the manufacturer's website to see what kind of power supply they recommend for their graphics card. You can go on any of their sites. Say you're buying an EVGA card, you can go on EVGA's website, type in the graphics card you want, say it's a RTX 3070. You select their card, you go to the specs, and you scroll down almost to the bottom usually, and it will tell you recommended power supply wattage, and it'll say 700 watts or 600 watts, depending on what card you pick. Whatever card you're thinking about buying or are buying, go to that manufacturer's website because they may differ in required power supply wattage. If you're thinking about getting an Asus card, go to Asus's website. If you want to get Gigabyte, go to Gigabyte's website. Because I went and got an Asus card a couple weeks ago, and their power supply requirements are 100 watts higher than what the Founders Edition or the reference style card is from EVGA. I'll leave a link down below for it, but PC Part Picker has an actual power supply wattage calculator. You go on their website, you select your parts that you want, you select the CPU, GPU, motherboard, all that stuff, and it will actually, in the top right-hand corner, it will show you how much power that system will draw. Now, I always go above what they say. So if the system says 525 watts of power, I usually get a 600 to 650 watt power supply. Now let's move on to a more in-depth look at the power supply, and I'll talk about the cables, what each cable does, what it's for. The very first cable you're gonna notice probably is this big cable. It's your 24-pin power. It's the biggest cable in the bundle, and like I said, you're gonna need this every single time because this will plug directly into your motherboard and supply power to the board and all of the connected components. The next most important cable, and actually it may be more important than the 24-pin, is your EPS power connector. This is usually a 4 or 8-pin connector, and your motherboard may need one of these. It may need half of one of these, which you could split them in half into a 4-pin. The next important connectors are your PCI connectors. These are usually a 6-pin connector with a little flyaway, I guess you could call it here, for a 2-pin to make an 8-pin. And you would just squeeze them together. They'll kind of overlap each other to create an 8-pin connector. And then some of them, actually most of them, have this pigtail coming off of it. It's another 8-pin connector. You can loop them back around and plug them into the GPU. That's not recommended because you're supplying the same power off of the same line. So if you have a GPU that requires 2 of these 8-pin connectors, rather than looping it around, I suggest finding another 8-pin and plugging both of them in from separate cables. The next connector that you'll see are these SATA cables. These are just a flat connector, kind of has like an L shape to it. SATA powered hard drives will be used for these connectors. You can use them in cases because some cases have RGB lighting. It'll plug into the RGB lights and actually power the case's lighting. RGB fan controllers, fan hubs, any kind of extra accessory usually is powered off of these SATA style plugs nowadays. They are not very flexible, so be careful when you're plugging them in because I have broken the actual plastic housing for these plenty of times. Luckily, usually power supply companies will give you lots of these cables, so you can just kind of wrap it up, set it to the side, and move on to another one. Now, the last type of connector you might encounter with your power supply are these type. This is a Molex connector. I think it was used to power the Titanic. No, but seriously, this is an older style plug. It really just supplies constant power. If you have an older case or something, they may have this style plug for the fans, as well as like a PWM plug to be able to plug into your motherboard, but it's gonna make the fan run at 100% speed all the time. So it just supplies power. And I don't recommend using these because most things nowadays have switched over to this SATA standard, the L style plug, so you can power them. Instead of needing Molex, you can just use these. Now, some power supplies on the back side of them, this one doesn't have it, but right beside your power switch here, there'll be a secret little button that'll either say Eco or fan or something along those lines. It's not a power button, it's not a turbo button or anything like that. It's an economy button for the fan. It'll let the fan go into 0 RPM mode at low load, and I just don't trust it, I'll be honest. If the fan needs to spin, it needs to spin. So even if you push the button in, when the fan needs to turn on, it's gonna turn on. I would just leave it undone and allow it to do its thing, because your case fans are probably gonna make more noise than this power supply fan is going to make, especially if you go with one of these good brands that I have here. Speaking of, since you stayed so long in the video, I'm gonna clue you in on which brands to go with and which brands to steer clear of. This is just my recommendations though. I have no scientific evidence to prove this or disprove it. As you can probably guess, I'm a big fan of Corsair and EVGA. By what I have here, I've had nothing but good luck with these brands, as well as Seasonic actually. I just got a Seasonic power supply for my computer, and I've been doing them for high-end builds for friends for years now, and they've never had any issues. So the three major brands is Corsair, EVGA, and Seasonic. If you shop for any of those, I'm sure you'll have a great experience and a long-lasting power supply. If you go with a 80 plus gold power supply or 80 plus bronze, you get different warranties from the companies. EVGA actually has 5-year warranties on their bronze rated power supplies on most of them. Some of them are 3-year warranties. Most of them I've seen from Corsair are 3-year warranties on the bronze. Well, gold rated power supplies all have 10-year warranties on them. So if your power supply shorts out or shuts down or doesn't work anymore, you can just send it back to the company. 10 years? That's longer than your whole computer is gonna last. Now, brands I recommend to stay away from. First one is Thermaltake. Now, I've just not heard good things about Thermaltake. I've heard of people's power supplies shorting out, having problems, having to get warranty work done. I've just heard horror stories, so I steer clear of them. I would recommend that you do the same. The other two brands that I would not go for is Rosewill. Rosewill makes power supplies for their cases. They make low-end cases, and they usually make the power supply for the case so they can throw it in as a combo. Those power supplies really aren't that high quality, and I don't recommend that you go out and try to find one. And then Gigabyte, just like the spider's nest web that I have here, I got this power supply with one of the Newegg Shuffle setups. You can buy a graphics card, you get a power supply included with it. I'd like to say it's free, but it's really not. Anyway, I haven't used this power supply in anything yet because I honestly don't trust it. Steve from Gamers Nexus did a complete breakdown review of the Gigabyte and the included power supplies. So you can go check out his video. I'll try to find it and throw it in the description below. When you're buying your power supply, I would honestly get what you need. If you're building a computer today and you only need 400 watts of power, I wouldn't get a 450 watt power supply, because if you want to upgrade later, you've got to upgrade the power supply. So go for something bigger. It's really not going to hurt your budget that much. Like I said, you can get this 850 watt power supply for 135 bucks. It may be more expensive now, but that's still not a bad price. And I can honestly slap in any graphics card I want. I can even put a 3090 in there and that thing will run it. So hopefully today's video about power supplies was all inclusive and I gave you as much information as you needed to be able to make informed decisions or have more knowledge when going and shopping for your next power supply. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to hit like and subscribe down below so you can catch more content just like this on Danny's Tech Channel. And as I always say, I'll see you in the next video.